I never really looked too far into digital IDs, but someone on one of our social media platforms, I think it was Instagram, had asked us to do a podcast on digital IDs. So over the last few weeks, I've done some research. I've learned some stuff I had no idea was even going on, things that are already happening that I hadn't even heard of yet. So I'm a little bit excited to do this podcast and talk about all this today. You've probably heard buzz about mobile driver's licenses, storing your state ID or your driver's license in your phone's digital wallet, holding your identity essentially electronically. Hey, I like to keep a picture of my licenses too, but only for a backup in case I forget my wallet or maybe I lose my wallet. What you might not realize is just how fast the digital ID world is moving, and I didn't know either, and how much risk it brings to your freedom, your preparedness, and most of all, your autonomy. So let's cut to the chase, and we're going to get right into it. What are digital IDs? When I say digital ID, basically mean a credential issued by a government or a state, like your driver's license, state ID card, maybe even your passport, but stored digitally, usually in a smartphone wallet or some kind of an identity app. It may use biometrics, like Face ID or fingerprints, to connect to government databases and be used far more than simply proving who you are. Here's the deal. Wait, I just used a Bidenism. Here's the deal, folks. Too soon? Seriously, though, this isn't some distant sci-fi, stuff that we're just talking about. It's real. Multiple U.S. states are already issuing mobile driver's licenses. They're calling them MDLs and rolling them into real-world use. The infrastructure, it's already in place. There's an international standard, ISO 18013-5, was approved in 2021, and it's basically the architecture for this state, and it's ready. States like California, they have pilot programs for iPhone and Apple Wallet and Google Wallet from late 2024. These are basically digital IDs that are already here. They're becoming part of your identity infrastructure. And from a preparedness angle and privacy angle, that means your identity, how you're proving who you are, how you access services, it's all starting to change. And if we don't pay attention, we are all vulnerable. So what are the big dangers of digital IDs? Well, let's talk risk, major risk. There are 6 big danger zones you need to understand and treat like threats, not just theoretical, but very, very real. One of them is surveillance and loss of autonomy. When your digital ID logs, you presented this credential here, the issuer knows, the system knows. That's basically like a phone home function that's baked into some digital ID standards, even if offline modes exist. In places like Denmark and Estonia, they've integrated digital IDs already into banking, healthcare, government services, and who knows what else. That's near total coverage. What's the consequence of that? Well, you lose autonomy, you lose control, and you become even more trackable than we already are using smartphones today. For a self-reliant person, that's a bad deal. Controlling your identity means controlling your life. The next, exclusion and access failure. All right, let's say you're using digital IDs in a program that's underway in a certain state. You might have a lot of places that are not accepting digital IDs yet, so they might be lagging. Even if you want to get one of these digital IDs, you may have some issues. There's many businesses and agencies that may not accept the digital version just yet. And if you depend on a digital-only credential, what happens if your phone dies? What happens if the network's down or the store doesn't accept it? You get locked out. So for preparedness, you must assume exclusion scenarios and build fallback paths, no matter what. The next issue, data breaches, of course. I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten over the last 6 months, I want to say 5 or 6 letters from different companies, whether it's a credit card company or like a healthcare, basically letting me know, hey, our system's been breached. They all say the same thing. They all say, oh, don't worry, we don't think they got your information, or maybe they just got names. But if they had a data breach, rest assured they probably got all of your information. And those companies might not tell you exactly what happened. So data breaches, identity theft, and centralized vulnerability. Digital credentials store the same info as your physical IDs, but now they're in a digital form and they're on your device, in an app, and even linked to networks. Privacy groups are going to have been warning, that you have become a prime target for hackers, even more so than we already are. If your digital identity is compromised, you could lose far more than just a card, like if you lost your wallet. You could lose assets, you could lose access, you could lose your ability to function in a digital world. Your identity is critical infrastructure, and you really have to keep it protected. Another issue, mission creep, control, and dependency. What starts voluntary often becomes required. So maybe some states have a pilot program where they're saying digital IDs are optional, but man, that's just their way of rolling things out to test it. And eventually, I think they're going to become required. A system once optional evolves into an obligation. And if your digital ID starts being required to access banking or employment, healthcare, or travel, you're tied to the issuer. So for self-reliance, that's a trap. You got to keep choice, you got to keep alternatives as long as you can. The next issue is infrastructure fragility and a single point of failure. Digital ID systems depend on the device, the app, the network, power. If any link fails, your phone dies, your carrier drops, maybe the network's down, you could lose your credential. So in a crisis, that failure is huge. Traditional preparedness, we teach redundancy as much as possible in everything that we do. And you have to apply that here as well. So another worry, discrimination and rights erosion. Think about people with old phones, limited tech literacy, like most of our parents if you're my age, or grandparents if you're a little bit younger. Can barely work a TV remote sometimes. Don't freak out, people. Or maybe that was too much. We do have a lot of people that are a little bit older. I'm not saying you don't know how to use tech, but you probably don't know how to use tech as good as some of the younger folks do. So that's all I'm saying. All right, unreliable connectivity. We all run into that all the time. So if the system pivots to digital only, man, that could get you excluded, especially if you live in a more rural area and you don't have access to the greatest internet. I know a lot of people that live in places where the internet's pretty spotty. So in your prep group, in your family network, that becomes a liability. Freedom means including everyone, not leaving some behind just because they're not as tech savvy. So your phone carrier and your device, they matter. It's not about getting the newest iPhone. Oh, hey, I got the iPhone. I don't even know what it's up to now, 17. I think I'm still on the 14. So by the time I get another one, it'll probably be somewhere in the 20s. So when it comes to devices, here's where stuff starts to get personal. Your digital ID lives on your smartphone. And your carrier, your device, your number, they all become part of the identity chain. So if your carrier is weak on security, they allow SIM swaps, tracks every move, you're introducing a weak link. So evaluate your carrier for privacy. Device security, SIM swap defense. You have to secure your device, updates, strong passwords, passcodes, biometrics, remote wipe. Keep a backup device offline. And make sure you're storing encrypted backups of credentials offline if you're using digital credentials. Because if the chain breaks, credential, device, carrier, network, you're out of the game. So what does this really mean for your preparedness and self-reliance, or just for the average everyday person? We always talk about, food, water, shelter, fire, communications, land nav, signaling, the basics of preparedness. But identity and access, they're just as critical. If you lose your credential, you lose mobility, you could lose access to services, your ability to engage in society as it is now, unless you live in the middle of nowhere. So here are some key implications. Mobility, so evacuation, travel, cross-state moving, your ID is essentially the pass. Shouldn't be that way, but it is. If it fails, you're stuck. No ID. You might not be able to get into a hotel if you need to. There's a lot of things that you will not be able to access if you don't have your ID. So service access, banking, healthcare. Your bank, without an ID, unless it's a local branch that knows exactly who you are, and even if that's the case, they may have a teller that doesn't know who you are. So you have to have your ID for banking. Most of the time for healthcare, government benefits, they all assume that you can verify who you are. So if your ID fails, you're going to lose access. What about control? When someone else manages your identity system, you're relinquishing control. Self-reliance means you own your identity. Now, redundancy, just like a generator backup, your analog ID. Make sure you still have a normal driver's license. See, I don't know how it's going to be if they implement electronic driver's licenses Are they going to give us the option to have normal driver's license? Because once you have your card, regular driver's license, when that expires, what if your state goes into the system where it's electronic now? They're probably not going to give you a printed card. So I could say, hey, don't go digital, but maybe you might not have a choice depending on where you live and depending on when all this really starts to happen. There's also a group risk. If your family or group depends solely on digital ID, one failure can drag everyone down at the same time. So by now, you're probably asking, same thing I was asking, what can I do about it? What steps can I take right now to make sure that this doesn't become a major issue for me? Well, here's what you can do today. No excuses. We're going to get through this. First, you want to do an identity audit. List all your physical credentials, passport, driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, anything that you have related to your identity. Mostly driver's license, passport, birth certificate, social security. Those are pretty much the most important and the ones you need the most for doing a lot of different things. And all your digital credentials as well. Mobile ID apps, wallet IDs, whatever that might be. For each, make sure you note what services rely on that specific ID. For each service, hey, ask yourself, if my digital ID fails, can I still access that service with my physical credential? And then mark the ones that are high risk. Also, you want credential backup. You want to have a strategy for this. You want to secure the originals. And I can't state this enough. If you don't have firearms, maybe you don't have a firearm safe, maybe you don't need a big gun cabinet, but you always have documents and you always have things that you don't want to lose in case there's a fire. Could be anything, titles to vehicles, passports, birth certificates, social security cards, important letters, any type of documentation. You want to put that in a fire and a flood-proof safe. Even if you have to buy just a smaller safe, that's good for, I think they start at like 30 minutes. They could be up to like 1,200 degrees, but you can get safes that go up to a couple hours. It really depends on how much money you want to spend, but you can get a really, really good fireproof and flood-proof safe, and I highly recommend that. You also want to make certified copies and store them at a trusted secondary location. So back to PACE planning. PACE, in case you haven't heard the podcast before or read any of our books, PACE stands for Primary, Alternate, Contingency, and Emergency. And again, that goes for everything in life and everything in preparedness. So try to make certified copies, store them at some kind of secondary location. That could be probably as a family member's house, could be a safe deposit box, and carry a wallet backup kit, which is basically a folder with copies, insurance card, backup contacts. That's another thing. Everyone, I don't think I know anyone that doesn't have a smartphone. And I'm guilty of this sometimes too. I don't always memorize some of the most important numbers. So you want to keep a card in your wallet that has, mom, dad, your son, anything that's really important for a phone number. In case your phone dies, you have to use someone else's or something happens. If you don't remember the numbers offhand, you want to keep a physical card with all the numbers that you need for an emergency written on that card. People lose their phone all the time, and sometimes they don't remember a single person's phone number. It's not like it used to be Gen X here. I mean, we had to dial everyone's number, and we memorized pretty much everyone's number that we called all the time. Now, they're all programmed in a cell phone. I hardly remember anybody's phone number. And periodically, you want to verify the validity of all your documents. Make sure they're not expired. Make sure. The next thing you want to look at is mobile infrastructure hardening. You want to review your carrier's privacy policy. You want to make sure they have SIM swap protection. You want to check their tracking policy. You want to make sure you can go through all of the settings, not just on your phone carrier, but in all your apps. There's certain apps where they want access to your microphone or your camera, and they have nothing to do with photos or videos or anything. So why would you give them that access? You need to make sure you look at that and turn off access where it's not required. And I would definitely consider switching to a privacy-first carrier, something like Cape Mobile. I think I'm going to put an ad in this podcast because Cape Mobile is actually sponsoring our podcast over the next 5 or 6 months. And you guys really need to check them out. They're an amazing company. I think it's $99 a month. And I actually pay almost that much with Verizon. And it's completely unlimited, but they're super private. And they don't save your information at all. You don't even need to give them. You got to check them out. I'll have videos talking about Cape Mobile, and I'll probably end up talking about them in every podcast as well. But I'll have specific videos that go through more details about exactly who they are and what services they offer, because they're really amazing if you're looking for a privacy-first carrier, which is really hard to find. So on your devices, you want to make sure you enable strong passwords, 2FA whenever you can, biometrics. You want to look at all this stuff. Keep all your software updated too, and remove any apps that you don't use. If you have apps, I have way too many apps, and I go through every week and I try to get rid of any apps that I'm not using anymore. But again, back to the permissions. You want to make sure you're not giving permissions to apps that they don't actually need, especially if they're apps that you don't need. Maybe you're using them every once in a while, but don't keep location data turned on all the time. Let's say you use one for hunting. Like I use one, I think it's called OnX. And I have location set on that because when I'm out hunting, I want to make sure it's way easier just to use my phone. I can see property lines. I can see exactly all the detailed information that I need without needing to have my standard, GPS, without having to crack out topo maps, compass and protractor. I can do it right on my phone. But when I'm not using that app, which is 99% of the time, if I'm not out in the woods, I'm going to turn off location tracking on that app, because that's another leak in my phone where if somebody was trying to track my location, they could through the app if there was a backdoor. You also want to get a backup device. You want to get a backup device with essential apps loaded and stored offline. I like to keep my backup cell phone in a Faraday bag. You can keep them in the cheaper EMP bags. Just the difference is, one of them is 40 decibels of attenuation. One of them's 80. One of them blocks all signals, Wi-Fi, 5G, 4G. Standard EMP bags are really just blocking, an EMP from destroying that device. And a lot of people, and I've talked about this in videos before, hey man, why would you keep a phone in a Faraday bag? Well, it's a backup for one. And if you've watched other podcasts, you know that I like to store thousands of survival and instructional manuals on a thumb drive with an attachment that I can use with my iPhone and my iPad. So I like to do that. And there's a lot of other information like backup pictures of social security card, birth certificate, driver's license, everything. You can keep all that backed up and keep it stored in a Faraday bag as a safety precaution. You also want to back up credential data encrypted on hardware you control. Again, USB, any type of external drive. You want to make sure you store this offline. I'm not saying don't use something like Backblaze or there's other cloud storage that have really, really good security, and some of them you can look into it. You can see if they're open source. They have a lot of great products and services that are out there. But even if you use that, I still recommend using a USB or some kind of an external. The best that I've researched for external hard drives is LaCie, L-E-C-I-E. They're a little expensive, but man, they're like bulletproof. I don't mean literally, but they're bulletproof as in they don't ever. I've bought hard drives in the past that are, 4, 5, 6, 10 gigs. And after a year, I usually have problems. I have probably 2 large hard drives somewhere in the house that don't even work anymore. I've never had to try to have them restored because I have backups to those as well. But I've heard a lot of good things about the LaCie hard drives. I have not bought one yet, but I do plan on getting one soon because they're supposed to be the best of the best. And like most things, you get what you pay for. All right, now we're going to talk about access segmentation. Don't let one digital credential cover everything. You want to maintain services that accept physical verification. Test physical credential paths. Go to a business, try to verify with your physical ID only for each key service. List plan B if your digital ID fails. You need to make sure you're thinking about this, especially if you're in a state where they're already using mobile driver's licenses. Now, what about household and group participation? Ensure everyone in your group, including the older folks, minors, remote members, they all have physical credentials and they know the backup plan. Teach them how to operate if their phone fails and set up some type of an identity access buddy system. Each person designates someone off-site who holds a backup copy securely for the other person. And you hold theirs. You could do this with your family. You could do it with your group if you have one. Include identity credential failure in your regular drills, an outage, phone lost, blocked credential, whatever the case may be. You just want to back up to the backup, back to PACE planning. Now listen, if your state does offer a digital ID program, you want to make sure you understand the policies. Is it optional? Is a physical ID still valid? What services accept the digital? What are the safeguards? Is there privacy? Are there opt-outs? Is that stuff weak? engage with your legislature, advocacy groups, whoever you can to get as much information about the digital ID as possible. And make sure you stay aware of the rollout deadlines and all the regulatory stuff that comes along with it as well. The more you know, the more you can influence, the more you can control. So let's say you're in a state where you do have a mobile driver's license. You want to make sure that you have identity credential failure on your mind. Define scenarios. I lost my phone, or my credential got revoked somehow, or my digital ID got flagged. Maybe it got hacked. You want to make sure. Assign the role. Is it you? Is it your wife or whoever in your family? Who's going to contact the banks? Do you have the information? Do you have all your bank information saved? Phone numbers? Who handles the carrier? Whose name is on the carrier? If you have a Verizon account, whose name is on it? Are both your names on it, or is it just in one person's name? Who's going to retrieve the backup device? Who's going to manage the travel? Just all the basic stuff that you need to think about. We're getting a little too far ahead because I'm talking like you guys already have mobile driver's licenses and like we're going to accept all this digital ID, but it's one step before social credit scores like they have in China. It's one step closer to a cashless society. And if you get a cashless society and social credit scores, that is basically the death of transactional freedom. And we do not want that in this country. You might think it's convenience. Oh man, that'd be great. No more cash. We don't have to worry about it. But think about that. Every single thing you do can be tracked and monitored if all of a sudden we're in a cashless society. Then it becomes more of an issue of, hey, now my digital ID, it isn't just who I am. It's what I did, where I went, what I bought, who I was with. Anything, it's just, it's a way to say, how compliant was he? This is what they're doing. This is what they do in China, social credit scores. It's completely insane. You got to look it up if you haven't read about that yet, and don't think they won't try to bring that here. And if we don't act fast, that's exactly where we're headed, and we don't want that. So what is a social credit score? What does that look like? In China, if you're a citizen or a business or a government institution, you're scored by trustworthiness. It's basically going by your behavior, your finances, your social conduct, your compliance. Millions of people there have been blacklisted. They can't fly, they can't use trains because they don't have a good social credit score. Now, while we don't have that in the U.S., and hopefully we never do, a national social credit label, man, the architecture is forming. Digital ID plus behavior tracking, financial access control. If your ID links to your behavior, the system can restrict you. So if they decide to do something, even if they don't call it a social credit score, if they're tracking you through your mobile ID, your digital ID, that means they're tracking you way beyond what they can do right now. And that should scare the hell out of everyone. The biggest worry for me, the war on cash. Digital money, cashless economy, maybe it sounds convenient to some people until it isn't. Central banks, they're developing digital currencies already. That can be programmed. They can expire. They can be geo-fenced where they only work in certain places. Once money is digital only, like I said, every purchase is logged. The system can say, you can't spend something on X. Your account is limited to Y. That's going to undermine your freedom, which is your fallback. We can't let this happen. And free commerce is going to be under threat. Peer-to-peer trade, bartering, cash transactions, those are vital for a free person and free people in this country. If the system enforces digital ID plus a cashless economy, man, that peer-to-peer trading becomes surveilled or even banned. Market transactions outside of the ledger might be discouraged or even illegal. For a prepared person, this means your fallback economy is bartering, local trade, and even that's going to face risk. Because if you can't use cash anywhere, you might be stuck to just bartering and local trading only. Imagine being locked out of the entire system because you refuse to go to, a cashless society, which I don't ever want to do. What's next? We're going to get the chip in our hand and our forehead and all of a sudden mark of the beast type stuff? I'm telling you, with AI and where I am right now, we moved to Pennsylvania, there are a massive, massive amount of data centers going up. I'm still in the construction management business, and I hear about them every day. They're going up everywhere. Where they're getting the power for all these data centers, I don't know. I don't know much about the data centers, but between that and AI, it's starting to exponentially, really, really fast get super creepy. And cashless society could be next. I mean, if they're already looking at digital IDs, what do we need cash for? This is just going to create even more control over the people. So use cash whenever possible. Make sure you're keeping real physical cash circulated in your network. You want to make sure also you're building local barter networks. That could be just neighbors, friends, family, local groups where you could trade skills for goods, any type of service outside of the digital ledger, assuming this happens, which, again, hopefully it doesn't. And of course, you want to invest in hard assets. Tools, food, fuel, physical metals, gold, silver, and definitely ammo. You'll never not be able to trade ammo. That's always going to be an excellent thing to have is ammo, because it's just one of the top things that people are going to want besides food and water is ammunition for physical protection. You also want to maintain parallel systems. Cash, barter, local trade, keep it alive. Make sure you have a system in place to take care of your group. If you don't have a group, we hear it a lot. A lot of people will reach out either email or through social media and say, hey man, my family thinks I'm crazy. They don't get into any prepping at all, and I can't find a group. I will say one thing, be very careful about just finding some random people online. Try to, go to gun shows, go to survival training, do different things where you're going to meet like-minded people. And maybe you don't find a group. Maybe you create your own group. But you have to get out there, you have to meet people, and you have to meet these people. Man, nowadays, it's like people don't want to meet anybody. They don't want to go anywhere. They just want to go about their business and be left alone. But if you don't have friends or you don't have family that are also into preparedness, you're going to have to venture out. You're going to have to meet people, again, that are like-minded. And create your own group if you can't find one. If you do have a digital identity, or you thinking about doing it in a certain state like California, make sure you're keeping your digital identity and infrastructure hardened. Make sure you're keeping it safe, because the system is always going to demand more of you. You have to educate your friends, your family, your network. Make sure everyone understands the risk of something like this, digital IDs, cashless society. You could be talking about the loss of normal free trade and participating in any type of, alternate economy. So in my opinion, the final layer of digital IDs, it's dependence, it's automated control, and it's basically engineered obedience, which is what they're looking for. We're not just talking about access or convenience. We're talking about who controls how it's used. Dependence is the new lever of control. So when your food, your water, your income, your healthcare, your identity, they all run through a centralized system, you become subject to all of their rules. That's dependence, which is their control over us. So if everything you rely on is managed by entities that you don't even trust, you're no longer independent. You're just basically a user under terms of service. You're not a free person. Convenience is never worth the trade-off. It's also automated governance. Algorithms, they already make critical decisions. They do fraud checks that can shut down your bank account. Loans can be denied without explanation. Social media bans without human resources at all. Most of that's AI. You may get, blocked on Facebook for something that you said. Most of the time, that's AI that's doing that. And when you respond to that and say, hey man, what's going on? Why'd you guys do this? A lot of times it gets overturned. AI is still doing it. AI is still banning people, still banning and deleting comments. That's the power of AI. So with digital ID layered in, you're looking at algorithms deciding your access to travel, your insurance rates, your housing, all kinds of services. That's not based on law. That's based on data profiles and some weird opaque rules. And most of the time, somebody made a good point the other day on social media. We were talking about data brokers, and people are like, hey man, just read the terms and conditions. But somebody did a study. If you read all the terms and conditions for everything that you have as far as a mobile app or anything electronic, they say it would take you about 70 plus days, full 8-hour days to get through all that. But somebody online said, hey, you can run the terms of services. You can run that through AI and it'll kind of give you a breakdown. Yes, you could probably do that. I haven't tried that yet. It definitely saved time. But there are a lot of services that you can opt out. So let's say you get an app. I don't really want to throw any apps under the bus. I've already done a little bit of that lately and probably been pissing people off. But make sure anything you can opt out of that you don't think is necessary for that app, like I said earlier, make sure you're opting out. Always opt out of, data sharing, or even when a company says, hey, do you want to send us the data or the details like when your system crashes so that we can improve on it and see what happened? No, you shouldn't be doing that. You're sharing data, you're sharing metadata, and I think you should try to stay as private as you can. You don't have to be a criminal to want to stay private. You all know how it is. If you have your phone next to you and you're talking about whatever, cheese doodles, I don't even know where that came from. All of a sudden you might see a cheese doodle ad on your phone, like on Facebook or somewhere else. That's spying. They're getting your data from you speaking near your device. And now they have Wi-Fi and friggin' toasters and refrigerators and TVs. It's everywhere. When you turned on your TV, your brand new, smart TV that you bought, did you read all the terms and conditions for all that? Because they could be accessing your microphone. They could be accessing your camera. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that we're automatically opting into without even paying attention. We got to take a look at that stuff because it's getting worse and worse. It's definitely not getting better. Like I said before, I think it was RFK Jr. He said it's soft totalitarianism. This is soft tyranny. It might not look like tyranny. There's no humiliating checkpoint. There's no riot squads. It's basically invisible filters deciding maybe what job you can apply for, what services you get, where your money works, where it doesn't work, whether your grocery card scans, all dressed up as efficiency and convenience. But convenience can be controlled, and it can be control in disguise. The window for resistance, it's pretty narrow right now. Today, you still have options. You still have plenty of options. You can opt out. You can use cash. You can build barter networks. You can choose private services. You can retain physical credentials. Once critical mass is locked into the new system, though, those exits are going to start closing. Once you're in that system, the system becomes the only system, and pulling out becomes really difficult and risky. So think about it. If you think it's great, man, I can get a driver's license that I can keep in my mobile wallet. That's awesome. But think about all the other things that go with that. And think about how it's going to snowball and get worse and worse and worse. They're just gaining more control. So what are some of the tactical counter moves? Building parallel economies, gray market resilience, stuff like that. It might sound a little crazy, but hey, if the system is starting to consolidate control and digital identity and programmable currency are being pushed, if privacy and liberty are being traded away for convenience, which seems to happen all the time, look at what happened after 9/11. We basically, hey, we want to feel safe. So we're going to let you slam the Patriot Act down our throat. And we're going to just change the way this country has operated. And it made it so much worse. Well, then your answer has to be active preparedness, freedom insurance. How do you build freedom insurance? Well, again, establish a parallel economy. You're not going to rely on mainstream if it demands full participation in this digital grid. So you have to use cash wherever you can, support local businesses that accept physical payment or bartering, any type of trade. And again, build a circle of trusted, not just friends, but vendors. I'm not talking about big corporations. You're not going to build like a circle with Walmart, but any vendors who operate outside of heavy digital verification. It could be a guy at the local gun shop. It could be a local farmer who sells, has a fruit stand or a vegetable stand every weekend. And you want to make sure, again, you're acquiring tradable goods, tools, ammo, food, fuel, gas, diesel, medical supplies is going to be a big one. Things people need, even if the system falters, they're still going to need all these things. So make sure, you're creating your own storefront. So if the system shuts down or, this whole mainstream electronics system just goes to hell, think like a prepper, but in everything that you do, trade with your neighbors, operate, like you're a blacksmith in a digital age. And it might come to that. You want to embrace the gray market. I'm not talking about creepy gray market. I'm not talking about, the dark web or whatever the hell. Gray market, I'm not talking about illegal stuff. I'm talking about, just regular unregulated peer-to-peer trade. The informal network that will survive when the digital grid cracks. Because I'm telling you, something's going to happen at some point where if they put everything digitized, it could be one major solar flare, it could be a high altitude EMP, probably more likely a solar flare, but man, that whole digital system could crack and we may not ever get it back. So maybe you become a farmer. You're selling eggs right to your neighbors, or you're trading, eggs and chicken for whatever, fuel, water, whatever the case may be. You could be a mechanic. You could be trading goods for fuel instead of, bank transfers. It could just be families swapping, babysitting, teaching, repair work, anything like that. Start small, build trust with your group. This is how freedom survives. And a big one, maybe start to de-digitize your essentials. Wherever you can disconnect your life from the system, do it. Get a landline. Nobody has a landline anymore. It's all about cell phones. Maybe get a landline or some kind of backup comms. Have a pace plan for your communications, and maybe that could be a landline where you don't have to rely on your phone, you don't have to rely on some app, where you can still make calls. And you want to, again, choose a privacy-first carrier. Go with something like Kate Mobile. That's what I would recommend. I highly recommend Kate Mobile. Make sure you guys check them out. And again, keep physical copies of all your key documents. And another big one, have offline maps, printed records, written contacts. I can't stress that enough. Have all your most important contacts written on whatever, an index card, a piece of paper. If you want to be better about it, do it in the Write in the Rain paper, which can get wet and it's not going to take the ink off. And it's pretty cheap, the Write in the Rain stuff. You can even get the Write in the Rain pencils and pens. They're pretty amazing. And it's just a good way to keep all of the things that you need written down without having to worry about them getting destroyed if they get a little bit wet. Think about this. If your ID, your money, your navigation, your social network, and your job, they all live in one app, you centralize your own risk. You have to unbundle your life and spread those dependencies out. You also want to train for real-world functionality. Modern systems, it sucks, but they made us soft. Convenience is comfortable. It just is. But that's dangerous. You should be able to cook if the power's out. You should be able to navigate without GPS. You should be able to communicate without a cell tower. And you should be able to defend yourself without any type of tech. Trade and move outside the system. If you aren't training for that, so here's an example of kind of trading outside of the system. There is an Amish farmers market close to where we live. I think they might be shutting down for the winter, but most of the year up until the end of October, you can get anything there. You can get fruit, vegetables, meats, pretty much anything you can think of from this Amish farmers market. And they only take cash. They don't do anything with credit cards or debit cards or anything. It's only cash. So that's essentially what it's going to be if things ever hit a certain point where, the digital world just crumbles on itself. So if you aren't training for that type of stuff now, well, you got a gap. You got to fill that gap. Our lives might depend on it someday. So build a community before the crisis. It's too late to form trust after some kind of event happens or after there's some big crackdown. You need to start building that group of families, trusted people who share your same values. And then create communication trees with those people. You want to make sure you're designating barter roles, people who have a certain amount of skills, and you want to train together, whether that's shooting, fighting, gardening, canning, off-grid skills, anything having to do with survival and preparedness. You really want to train as a group as much as possible. And store redundancy, not just for you, but for your entire network. Make sure you're all working as a team. Maybe someone has access, maybe someone works somewhere where they have access to something like survival food. Maybe they can get it wholesale. That person, you should go through that person and have everybody in the group buy all their survival food through them. Another good way to save money. Maybe somebody works at a gun shop and they get, discount on ammo and firearms and things like that. Go through them. Make a list of everyone in your group, not just what skills they have. What can they help the rest of the group with? Can they train the rest of the group in certain things? Can they get special discounts so we can stock up on better gear? Anything like that. Just, keep that contact tree and fill in like, all right, Joe, he's a plumber. John, he's a doctor. Bill's a firefighter, whatever. These guys are ex-military. These guys can help train us in firearms. Make sure you understand everyone's role in the group and then try to cross-train everyone. If somebody is only good at, canning or gardening, teach them how to shoot. Teach them how to fight. Teach them how to build things. Just cross-train everyone as much as you can. This isn't just survival. This is freedom insurance. Everybody talks about, you see it online all the time. There's always the lone wolf. There's always the Rambo of the group where they're like, man, I forget everybody else. If society goes down, I'm off in the woods and I'm just going to live it out. Forget about the rest of you. Most of those people, they're not going to make it. Yes, are there some that will? Of course there are. There's some very highly trained people out there that could survive on their own without a problem. But that also means, do you not have family? Do you not have friends? Is there no one that you care about? You're just going to go off and just ditch everyone that you love? That doesn't seem very reasonable. It doesn't seem very Christian either. You should be trying to help people as much as you can without putting your own family at risk. So the lone wolf thing, it's kind of BS. You don't want to be a lone wolf. You want to have a group. You want to make sure that you have other people that you can rely on and have other people that can rely on you, because you're going to have a stronger system and a stronger setup. You're also going to need that for security. You could be Rambo. You could be John Wick. But even if you are, you can't have 360-degree 24/7 protection. You have to sleep at some point. You could still be outflanked no matter how skilled you are. Nobody is that good. So you really have to have a group if you really expect to survive long term. We've covered a lot so far in this podcast. Talked about digital IDs, what they are, talk about the dangers of cashless society, which hopefully we never get there, but it seems like we probably will. Where we are now, what the danger zones are, social credit scores, why your phone and your carrier, why they matter, why you need to be as private as you can, especially in the digital world. And, we talked about, to me, the most important thing for this podcast is preparedness isn't just about food, water, power, evacuation. It's everything: identity, mobility, autonomy. If your identity becomes dependent on a system that you don't control, you're giving up complete control in that case. And it's not, again, survival is so much more than just, fire, water, shelter, food. It's so much more than that. There is a lot of things that you need to take into account. And you really need to have a good, solid PACE plan. Again, PACE is primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. We get it all the time. People are like, hey, man, I can't go get a cabin in the woods. I'm renting an apartment, or I don't even own my house. I'm renting the house. You don't need to own other property. Your alternate plan could be your uncle's house, your cousin's house, your brother's house. That could also be your contingency, a different family member, or maybe a friend, or maybe your group. Your emergency plan, that's the drop dead plan where maybe you have to go out in the woods. Maybe things got so crazy at all the other locations that you have no choice but to just disappear into the woods just for your own safety and your family's safety. Doesn't mean you can't come back. Doesn't mean you can't implement other plans, because you definitely don't want to have to do that long term. But you need to start thinking about, how do I put this? I think right now people are far too comfortable, way too comfortable with the way things are. People, again, I had no idea that they were already introducing mobile driver's licenses in certain places. I didn't know that. Maybe I should have. You think I probably would have. They haven't done it where I am, so it's not been something I've been thinking about. But there's just a lot of things happening, again, with AI, with them talking about potentially getting cash out of the way. You don't want that to happen. It's only going to get worse. It may seem convenient at first, but it is not going to be. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole. And listen, if you get stuck and you have no choice, you live in a state where all of a sudden they mandate mobile driver's licenses, well, you're not saying no digital ID ever. I think you should say you're never going to put a chip in me that where I have to scan to pay for something or scan to, a chip in my body to give you my ID. That's never going to happen. They can kill me first. But maybe a mobile driver's license, maybe it's not the end of the world. But again, don't rely on that one system by itself. You have to have a fallback. You have to be able to control everything that you possibly can. You don't want to just give everything up to the state. That's just complete insanity. Here at Survival Summit, we believe in freedom, faith, family, and leadership. And that means you lead your life, including your identity. You don't hand it to someone on an app or a device or a system that you don't trust. Just don't do it. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. We got another podcast in the works. Hopefully that'll be out in the next week or so. Stay sharp, stay ready, and keep control of your identity, because freedom starts with knowing who you are and owning it. And if you like this episode, make sure you like it. Feel free to leave a comment and go to thesurvivalsummit.com to dig deeper into all the things we offer. Training, books. We don't sell gear anymore. We stopped selling gear a few weeks ago. I think we're going to start developing gear that's branded for us. We're going to try to get everything made in the USA whenever possible. But for now, we're sticking with our books and our instructional videos. So make sure you check out thesurvivalsummit.com.